Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Red Laugh Riot podcast. My name's Matt.
And I'm Ben.
Brilliant. So this is episode 9, I believe. Um, who thought we'd get this far, Ben? Who thought? Um, yeah.
I don't
Who
know.
thought we'd get this far? This is a bit of a special episode because a little bit later on we'll be bringing on one of our Patreon supporters, um, who's pledged at the highest level, which is $25, if I'm correct. Hopefully I am. I'm
Yeah.
correct, right? $25. Yeah, sweet.
Yes.
$25. So that means as the tier reward thing, he gets to feature on the podcast. And so we'll bring him on a little bit later.
All right. Well, the first segment of the show is called Reading the Headlines. That's where we go to the top of Reddit. Well, we sort by the top posts from this week. We read some headlines and we talk about them. And the first headline is, I believe, slightly politic related, which of course is right down your alley, Matt. And that is for 30 years, Mr. Hinton was
Yep.
stripped of all his rights while he sat on Alabama death row for a crime he didn't commit. Today, he arrived at the polls at 7 a.m. and exercised his right to vote. So he's just a guy who's finally out of prison for a crime he didn't commit.
Yeah.
So actually, it's not really
What?
politics related. It's just I don't even know there's
Yeah.
voting going on right now. I'm confused. Do you even know what the midterms are? Because I
All
have
right.
no idea
Yeah,
what they
yeah,
are.
yeah. So the midterm elections, I've actually been I was following the midterm elections because I find American politics to be fascinating. And like I mentioned in previous podcasts, had I not gone into film, I probably would have gone into politics, or at least like not being an actual politician, but like analyzing politics because I find it fascinating. Um, Basically, the midterms is what happens is that every 2 years. Um, And so what happens is every 2 years, the American public vote for their respective senators. Um, and so they sit in the Senate. Um, oh no, they don't vote for. Sorry, every 2 years they vote for their congressmen who sit in the House. And so they have 2-year terms, and then the other house in Congress is called the Senate, and only like 35 seats are up in that every 2 years, because senators have 6-year terms, but congressmen only have 2 years, and the entire house is up for grabs. So basically, what happens is so they're voting basically for their individual representative. It's kind of like voting for your MP. So who's going to
Right.
represent
Okay.
you in Parliament, as opposed to the federal election, which is you're voting for which is mainly you're voting for the president. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, did that make any sense or nah?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, this particular story is definitely very interesting.
yeah,
And it brings up a good point. So, just to recap, this guy was in prison, and he was on death row for 30 years. Firstly, I'm shocked at how long you can be on death row. I didn't
yeah,
realize it takes such a long time. But
yeah,
one of the top comments here is, "This is why I can't agree with the death penalty. Yes, there are
yeah,
people out there that have committed crimes, but due to human error, political corruption, and prejudice, there will always be false convictions." And someone
yeah,
replied saying, "Since 1974, 164 inmates have been released from death row with evidence of their innocence," which leaves you wondering
yeah,
about those innocent people that may have been executed because of lack of evidence. And
yeah.
that's actually
I
pretty
mean,
kind of a frightening thought, isn't it?
yeah. One of the interesting things about that, just to jump on that, is now forgive me because I've forgotten the exact statistic. Because majority of the time, people go to prison because they make plea deals and stuff like that.
Right,
Like very few cases actually go to trial, and so there's
right,
also a thing of now I basically you can be like you can let people can literally be convinced that they've committed a crime that they haven't. Like there's this
really.
psychological thing that you can actually be convinced that you've committed a crime if even though you haven't, because of
Jeez.
memories and how memories are created within the brain. um, and so there's a lot of people who confess to crimes that they didn't actually do,
Right.
which is like, which is terrifying. It's so terrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a real thing. Yeah, it's good for the guy that he got released from prison. Especially being on death row.
Yeah, that'd be so frightening.
Yeah, 30 years doesn't surprise me because the thing was they have that sort of thing in place because they want to try and avoid, basically killing innocent people. So there's a huge appeal process that drags on for like decades, where they sort of appeal, where a lot of the time the accused, I don't think they're considered the accused in that scenario, but the accused will appeal, well, their lawyer, will appeal.
Yeah, apparently he was paid $1.5 million and like as a settlement compensation
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, which for 30 years of your life, I don't know if that even covers it. There's some people saying he
yeah,
should have got like 5 or 6 million.
yeah.
Like that's just crazy. You lose so much of your life. I don't know what I'd do with myself. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I saw that was really interesting, was it was a bunch of people talking about friends of theirs that were in prison for long periods of time, right? And they walked out of prison and they were like just completely blown away with how like things have progressed, like
Yeah.
technology wise, and like who was president and stuff like that. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and just
True.
being like shell shocked. And there was a story of a guy who I can't remember what this guy who was like, a convict and was, in prison for X amount of years, got out, was like at the supermarket or something, and had a breakdown because there was so many like options, like brands on the shelf. And he like literally had a breakdown from that
Really. Jeez.
just because of like, like imagine how much stuff would change in 30 years. Like that's insane to think about. And being in that position, which is
Mm.
yeah, which is really interesting. Um, but yeah, no, it was a really interesting. It might have been on Reddit actually. Um, but I can't remember. But yeah, it was really interesting, sort of reading all these stories of people who had been released from prison, and sort of trying to readjust to
Yeah.
society.
All right. Well, moving on from that. Um, and the next headline is from Today I Learned, and that is Today I learned that in 1825, painter Samuel Morse received a letter which read that his wife was sick. The day after that, a new one said that she was dead. When 2 days later he
Oh,
went to when 2 days later he went to his wife, he discovered that she was already buried. Pissed off for the slowness of communications, he invented the Morse code.
oh,
Well, that's both sad and happy, I guess, because he invented quite a useful thing. Uh,
yeah,
I can't imagine living in that world. It's like nearly
yeah,
200 years ago, where there's just
yeah.
we can't, no instant communication like what we're doing right now, for example.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was interesting because I watched. No, I didn't watch. No, like I was listening to a streamer, um and they were talking about this hypothetical situation, which I found really interesting, right? So the situation is there's this witch, right, who's really pissed off at humanity, and so she decides to punish everyone by basically removing all human progress that has existed over the last 1,000 years, right? So
Huh.
everything
Yeah.
everything that humanity's created in 1,000 years is gone, right? but we still have
Yeah.
the same population, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the question was, how long would it take humanity to make an iPhone?
Well, when, well, I don't know. Like, it depends on
Yeah.
the situation. Like, do we still have the memories of everything that we've created, and now
I
it suddenly just disappeared, and we don't know how to
oh
recreate it? Is that what it is, or do we
um
not even know
and
that
we
those things existed?
yeah, yeah, we lose like all knowledge.
The thing I find interesting is that when we conceptualize things, we kind of talked about this in
Mm,
the Back to the Future episode. When there are things that we create in our minds and in our imagination, it actually compels us to make those things in real life. And we saw that happen with like the Nike lace up shoes, right? From Back to the Future.
yeah,
How I think Nike worked on those for a few years and they came out in 2013 or 14. And of course, which was inspired by the fiction, right? If that had never existed,
yeah,
if that story had never existed, then that never would have been made. So if we have this witch who's showing us this iPhone, then at least we have something to inspire us to move on and make that thing. I think
mm,
that would help. But if for example we didn't have any of that knowledge, then of course it would be thousands of years to develop all that. I think it would take a lot longer because we wouldn't have that goal in mind. Because back in the day, people didn't imagine that you'd have computers in your pockets. Like I was watching a video from Cold Fusion yesterday, who was talking about like some of the dumbest things that big CEOs have said, and one of them was like
yeah,
someone at IBM 100 years ago or something, saying that there's a world market for about 5 computers in the whole world. Like that's how many
yeah,
computers he reckoned the whole world needed. 5, because they were all their use was so much different and so much more constrained, and obviously they were huge, giant, enormously expensive machines as well. So people just didn't even consider those kind of options. Whereas if you have that imagination or that idea in your head, then you, like I said, you set your goal to that,
mm,
and you're
yeah,
more likely to achieve it, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, I think my view on it is like firstly you have to look at all the stuff that actually goes into making an iPhone, right? So like we'd have to learn how to make glass again, we'd have to mine all these like materials and stuff, right? And so that would take ages to like get back um to like getting back to that stage. And then also a really interesting point was made where a lot of the world's population would just die because they wouldn't have access to, because like supermarkets and all that stuff would just disappear, right? So basically
True.
everyone in
Yeah.
cities would have no access to food, like refrigerators would disappear.
Well,
um
are you also saying that like apartment buildings would disappear because we don't have the
yeah,
architecture ability to have people
yeah.
living in those spaces?
Yeah, so like just a bunch of the world population would be killed off like in an instant, which is really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It was just it was a really interesting hypothetical.
Well, I would say it's not always the best thing to dwell on the past. Um, Instead, shall we look a bit towards the future? Next headline is from News: Michigan becomes the 10th state to legalize recreational marijuana. It's funny that we were talking about this not
Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
good on
Yeah.
Michigan. A. Yeah, well, we've both made our drug um views quite clear, but I do want to add a thing that I forgot to mention um in the last episode, and that's in regards to addiction, right? So for a start, people say that you can't get addicted to marijuana, which is false. You can actually get addicted to marijuana. But you can get addicted to anything, right? So like
Yeah, of course.
here was a really good argument that was posed to me, right? So our current understanding of addiction, right? Or like the old understanding of addiction was if both of us, right, went out today,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and we both
Yeah.
did heroin, right? We both did heroin for 30 days. We would get addicted to heroin, correct?
Sure. I'm not familiar with the statistics.
So the question is, right? Why is it that people go into like hospitals, right? And they're in hospitals for 30 days or whatever, on morphine, right? And they don't
Mm-hmm.
get addicted. how come is that possible? Well, the answer is the environment, right? Because our old understanding of addiction was basically based off this psychological study where you got a rat, chucked it into a cage, um, gave it two bottles of water, one with water, one laced with like heroin or cocaine or whatever. And majority of the time, the rats would drink the drugged water, basically to the point where they overdosed and died. And so after the Vietnam War, where there was a bunch of American soldiers, like 20%, I think, were doing heroin. Um, and so that basically everyone was worried that a bunch of the soldiers would come back and they'd be addicted to heroin. But the majority of them actually returned and just stopped using. So the psychologist was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder why that is." And so he took that old experiment with the rat. This time he changed it slightly, and he got a cage with water, same thing, one with water, one laced with heroin and cocaine, but he filled the cage with like a bunch of toys, and other rats and stuff like that, right? The majority of the rats, didn't actually drink the drugged water. They drank the normal water. And so that basically raises the thing that addiction is more about the environment that you're placed in, right? Addiction is essentially an escape. Everyone has that thing that they use to escape, right? Unfortunately, some people end up choosing drugs. And so, therefore, if you think of addiction like that, then you really have to think of it as a health concern and looking at more of a how do we fix these people's lives, right? And therefore make them less likely
Right. Yeah.
to use and abuse drugs.
Good old Matt ranting about drugs. Yeah. Well, obviously, if you want to hear more about our thoughts on the whole marijuana situation, go back to episode 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna
We
say
got
7.
and
I'll say
you can
7.
hear our thoughts on that one.
You know what? You know what a lot of musicians did back in the day? Drugs. So we're gonna talk about our top 5 cover songs. What a segue! Made it work. Yeah. So this
I don't think that
little
was a
segment,
segue.
I would just go with it. All right, just go with
All
it.
right, all right, all
Um,
right.
so our top, yeah. So this little segment is called Top Five. It's where we give our top 5 things on stuff. This is inspired from the film High Fidelity. I'll go first, then Ben will say his, and we'll alternate back and forth like that. Awesome. All right. So without further ado, right, let's analyze what makes a good cover song, right? My opinion, it's when there's 2 criteria, right? First criteria is does the artist make the song their own? The second criteria is is it a is it a complete reworking of it, right? And you can basically rework a song in 2 ways, in my opinion, right? You either strip it down or you hype it up. So my number 5 pick is a very common pick. Oh, a third thing is if people don't actually know the cover song is a cover and they think it's an original. So my number 5 pick, I think, to be honest, probably hits all those criteria. And that's Hurt by Johnny Cash, originally by Nine Inch Nails. Yeah, a lot of people
Really?
think, yeah, it's a cover. It's a cover. Not a lot of people know that. Thank you, Ben, for proving my point. Um,
Damn.
yeah, so he completely reworks it, makes it his own. A good story is Trent Reznor, I believe his name is, who's the lead singer of Nine Inch Nails, basically said, yeah, it's Johnny Cash's song. Like he admitted that. Um,
Really?
I mean, really cool for Johnny, this like rock band, to have like a huge country star, to cover it, right? That's awesome. Um, and so yeah, so Johnny Cash covered it. He covered it in 2000, somewhere between 2003 and 2005, which was just before Johnny Cash's death. So that sort of gives it an extra like oomph. Um, I mean, and you just have to, the song sort of speaks for itself. It's so depressing and just stripped down. And Johnny Cash just gives a beautiful performance. of it. So that's my number five pick. Hurt by Johnny Cash.
Well, my number five pick is Seven Nation Army, performed by Ben L'Oncle Soul. This is the French singer that
Okay.
I mentioned in my honorable mentions a few podcasts ago, where we talked about our favorite music artists.
Yeah.
And it's just good fun. I like the original very much as well. Um,
Yeah.
this one's a bit more funky, kind of chill, a bit, I guess.
Okay.
He does sing it all in English because he does some French songs as well, in
Yeah.
French, that is. Yeah, and yeah, it's just fun. I don't know. To be honest, I don't I don't listen to heaps and heaps of cover songs. I mean, there's a few artists that do some covers, and so this is just one of those ones that I enjoy.
Sweet. All right. So now we're up to my number four, which is Jolene. Funnily enough, covered by the White Stripes. Um, originally by Dolly Parton. So yeah, when I was saying, yeah, you can either strip a song down or you can hype a song up. This is definitely one where the song's hyped up. So the White Stripes give a real rocky performance. You know, they rock up this country song, and it sounds just awesome. Yeah, the guitar work's all drippy. That's not the right word. Like sort of grungy and pretty heavy as well. Yeah, so you've got that sort of thing, um, with it, and Jack White's vocals as well. Really just yeah, just so grungy again. The interesting thing is he doesn't change the lyrics from it. Because obviously, Jolene is a song that's sung from the perspective of a woman about a man. Um, and something about a man singing those lyrics gives it just an extra edge, and you can hear the emotion in Jack's voice that just gives it an extra oomph. So that's my number four pick, Jolene by the White Stripes.
Yeah, my number four pick is kind of the only one in the pop genre that I have on my list, and that's "Lean On," performed by Pentatonics. So the original is by DJ Snake and Major Lazer, and it was quite a popular song a couple of years ago. And Pentatonics came out with a full original album a year or two ago, and it had three covers on it, and this was one of them. And I thought it was really really well done. I think it's quite a neat recreation, I guess, of it. A lot of pentatonic stuff, it's either like really cool or really cringy. This is one of the cool ones.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'm kind of down the middle with pentatonics. Like some of their stuff is just like I hate listening to it or hearing it, and then some of it I really enjoy as well. Most of their
Yeah.
album, their original album, I really like. And this I think was the best of the three covers. I thought it was just really good.
Cool. My number three pick is again one of the songs that a lot of people don't actually know is a cover, and that's "All Along the Watchtower" by Jimi Hendrix. It's originally by Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan's one is great as well. But Jimi Hendrix just takes the guitar work, makes it his own, and basically proves why he's one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Probably the best, to be honest. There's a really interesting quote by John Mayer, who said, "Who I am as a guitarist is defined by my failure to become Jimi Hendrix."
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a really cool quote. I reckon. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and just absolutely knocks it out of the park. Yeah, that's my number three pick.
Right. Funny that you mentioned John Mayer, because my number three pick is from John Mayer, and it's "I Don't Need No Doctor," originally by Ray Charles, I believe. Regardless, it's a great song and a great cover. It's on his Live in Los Angeles album. I think it's on his Continuum album as well. But yeah, that Live in LA album is fantastic, and it's full of some great stuff. And there's a couple covers in there. There's a Hendrix cover in there as well. Um,
Hey,
yeah, and it's one of those songs near the end of this live album that just goes off, like just
yeah,
the guitarmanship and his whole band there in that concert was just like so good. I just had to put it up there. It's one of my faves to listen to, and like sometimes I forget that it's a cover because, I mean, I know it is, but like because John does it so well, it just feels like his own, you know?
I think that's a mark of a good cover is when an artist takes a song and makes it their own. And they get
Yeah,
extra points if people don't actually realize a song is a cover. Which
right,
which I think applies to some of the songs that I have on my top five list. Not so much with this song, just because of how iconic the original is, but that is Billie Jean by Chris Cornell, originally by Michael Jackson. So Chris Cornell takes this song and just strips it down to this real grungy version. Takes out the bass line, unfortunately, because the bass line in Billie Jean is amazing. One of the greatest bass lines of all time, I would argue. What's really interesting about this song is he takes it, yeah, like he makes it his own, but also it's incredibly depressing. If you actually look at the lyrics of Billie Jean, the song's really depressing. And he just
right.
highlights that fact with the fact that he strips the song down to just the guitar really and him. And there's moments in it where he growls and stuff like that, which is very typical for grunge, for the grunge genre. But I just love it, and it's so amazing. Yeah, so that's my number two pick.
Cool. Well, Matt, I hope you don't hate me for this, but my number two pick is another one from John Mayer. Um,
Okay.
and that's Free Falling. Originally by Tom Petty.
Ah,
And John,
yeah.
he changed this one up a bit. It's not just like the way he did the chorus was quite different from how Tom did it. And he actually talked about this when I saw him live 4 years ago now, 4.5 years ago probably. He mentioned it before he played it. He talked about how he was, I think, sitting in a hotel room, and he was playing this song, and he just decided to change it up, decided to add some new flavor to it, I think, and make it his own as well. And a lot of people would argue it's one of the best renditions of that song. Absolutely, I'd much rather listen to that version than the Tom Petty version, to be honest. Um, yeah, really fantastic cover, and again, that's from his Live in LA album, and he does it better than I think anyone else.
So now we've hit our honorable mentions. So I've got a couple. My first honorable mention is "The Man Who Sold the World" by Nirvana, originally by David Bowie. What a version of this song. I've mentioned before, I think Nirvana's amazing. This song just missed my top five, got knocked out by Hurt, but an amazing cover song. Again, a very good example of a cover song that people don't realize is actually a cover. There's a story of a David Bowie was performing "The Man Who Sold the World" in concert, and someone came up to him and said, "Oh, it's really cool that you're doing a Nirvana cover."
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I find really funny. My second honorable mention is "Do I Want to Know" by Christina Grimmie, originally by the Arctic Monkeys. Christina Grimmie might be a name that some people slightly recognize, and that's because she was one of those YouTube singers for a bit. Went on The Voice, started her career. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 years ago, I want to say, she was in concert and she got shot actually. And so
Jeez.
she passed away, and she was only like 22. But she's left an incredible body of work. One of which is this cover, which I actually really like. A friend of mine showed me it, because he knew how much I like the Arctic Monkeys. And I really like this cover. It's really interesting. She takes this guitar-based song, she changes it to being on a piano, and she sort of takes it into a different direction as a result. Unfortunately, it's missing that bass line, the bass line in the original,
All right.
which is an amazing bass line that I absolutely love. Yeah, and I think that's that bass line is the best part of the song, um, well, of the original song. My third pick is "Somebody Else" by Dodie, who's another YouTuber. It's originally by the 1975. Again, takes this sort of pop rocky song, strips it down to this piano ballad, um, and it really works for this song. My final honorable mention is Hallelujah, by James Buckley, originally by Leonard Cohen. Yeah, I mean, this song is just fantastic. James Buckley just hits it out of the park with his vocals, and his guitar work as well. But his vocals are the other thing that shines. If you've heard this version of the song, you know what I'm talking about. Those are my honorable mentions.
I was afraid for a second there you were going to say Hallelujah by Pentatonics because I hate that so much. Um,
I like
like I
it.
said
It's
before,
good.
really,
I
really.
disagree with you. I like
So
that
that's
version.
like that. I skimmed through that whole album, that whole, and I just like cringed at almost all of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not as good as James Buckley's version though. James Buckley's version is the best version of it by far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'm gonna quick fire through these honorable mentions. Firstly is "Beat It" by Fall Out Boy, also featuring John Mayer. And some more John Mayer covers: "Crossroads," "Call Me the Breeze," "XO," which is by Beyonce, and "I Got a Woman," which he does with the John Mayer trio. I have to rant about for just half a second because this one is another one which is originally by Ray Charles. I was playing the song. I feel like maybe I've talked about this before. Maybe I haven't. Anyway, I was playing this song one day, and and one of my friends starts singing the Gold Digger song. I don't know who did that song. Was it Kanye West or one of those people? I
Yeah,
can't remember.
Kanye West.
Was it him? Okay. Yeah. And I just said, and my friend, who's another friend, who was a huge John Mayer fan as well, genuinely thought that John Mayer Trio covered Kanye West. And I was like, what
Oh
are you on
wow.
about? It's a completely different song, and I hate that. So I hate that they took the original greatness of "I Got a Woman" and turned it into a total pile of trash. And now everyone hears that tune and they think of Gold Digger instead of the original great song, which was "I Got a Woman," performed fantastically by the John Mayer Trio. Right over, continuing on. London Grammar,
uh,
as I mentioned on the music one, love them. They've done some good covers. Bittersweet Symphony, they did on their most recent album, and that's really good. Michael Bublé, who I like some of, he's a cover artist, obviously, so he's got plenty of them. Some of my favourites: "Stuck in the Middle with You," "Cry Me a River," not the dumb Justin Timberlake one, the actual proper one, "Georgia on My Mind," "Baby, You've Got What It Takes," and "End of May." Naked and Famous, recently in their acoustic album, did a cover of "Teardrop," which was really nice. Pentatonics, again, as I mentioned before, they did Justin Bieber's "Where Are You Now," and they also did "Cheerleader." They were quite good ones. They've done heaps of other
yeah.
covers, as I mentioned. Half of them I've cringed at, half of them I've liked. Um, this indie artist that I've mentioned on the music podcast, Sam Secombe, he did a cover of John Mayer's "I Don't Trust Myself," and I had to mention it because I think it's really well done for just like a little indie artist making his way on SoundCloud. Also, "Santa Baby" by Wolfpack, which is an instrumental cover, but it's so funky and fresh and it sounds so good. It's the only Christmas one I put on here because I know Christmas songs usually you can't even call them covers because everyone does Christmas songs. But that one I had to mention because I love it so much, and I would play that all year round. Um, Elise Trow did a great medley, like a mashup thing, where she did like a live looping thing, and she covered "Everlong" by Foo Fighters, meshed with "What You
Oh.
Won't Do for What You Won't Do for Love" by Bobby Caldwell. And that was a really really nice rendition that I highly recommend. And the last thing I got to mention, there's this YouTube channel called Kick the Jet Engine, which I don't know if they do music anymore. I think the last upload was like from 10 months ago. But they did a couple songs which are made up entirely from sounds from the Super Mario Bros. Games, like on the SNES and on the N64 maybe. And they did a cover of "Lean On," another cover of "Lean On," which I liked, and also they did one of Levels by Avicii, and they mashed it up with some Super Mario Bros. Sounds, as in music, in there as well. And it's just so well done, and to think it all came off actual sounds from the old Nintendo system, I think, and from those games, it's actually incredibly well done. Like it sounds like real music. So check those ones out if you're in for a bit of a retro jam. That's my honorable mentions.
Without further ado, my number one is "Where Did You Sleep Last Night" by Nirvana, originally by Led Belly. Okay, so this song was performed like "The Man Who Sold the World." This was performed on their MTV Unplugged in New York in 1993, and it was like 6 months before Cobain's death. Oh, and it's just an amazing performance. And this was the last song that they performed, and oh, it legitimately gives me chills. This version, yeah. Nirvana again, they take their well-used formula of quiet verses and louder choruses, but it's acoustic. And so, "Where Did You Sleep Last Night" is this sort of old, um, American folk song, but Nirvana grunges it up, and they deliver such an amazing performance, that just gives me chills. Again, it's one of those songs where, it's a genre change. It's a Nirvana making it their own. Yeah, I mean, and there's a moment, if you watch the actual recording of this performance, where one of the lines in the song is like something is shiver, and so he sings shiver. His voice cracks, and because his eyes are closed, and he opens his eyes, and the look on his eyes gives me, like, I can't describe it, but it gives me chills. If you get the chance to watch an actual recording of it, I suggest you do, because it's amazing, and especially that moment. Oh, it legitimately gives me chills. I wish I could put it into words how much I love this cover, but I can't, because it's overwhelming, and I love it so much. That's my number one.
Cool. Good to hear. Well, I'm glad that for once we didn't have any repeats. But my number one favorite cover song of all time is "Feeling Good" by Muse, not by Michael Bublé. No, Muse did such a
Ah,
good version of this song, and I don't know. I think it's just one of the best covers ever performed, because it's just like, obviously, like, it's a song that can be done so differently in so many different ways, and you've heard it from Nina Simone to Michael Bublé now to Muse, and they're all so different. Because if you don't know, the song was actually originally written for like a play ages ago, and I think Nina Simone was the first one who recorded it on like her own album. Michael Bublé is probably the most famous one, or the most well recognized version anyway, and that's the version you might usually
right.
hear, which is that kind of intense jazzy one, I guess. Whereas, yeah, while Muse is also intense, it's obviously completely different instrumentation, and I just really love it. It's just really fantastic. And that's my number one.
Awesome.
Well, it was interesting to hear how much passion you have for these cover songs. I mean, personally, I find like I usually I don't seek out cover songs, or specifically have a passion for a certain cover song. It's mostly just if it's an artist I already follow and they put out this song, and then I find out it's a cover, and I'm like, or I already recognize that it's a cover, and I'm like, oh, that's actually really good. I really like that. But like,
Yeah.
for example, when I first found John Mayer, I didn't know Free Falling or Don't Need No Doctor were covered until I kind of did a little bit more research into that album. But yeah, I think they're basically just songs that I really enjoy, and I would rather listen to those versions of those songs. Um,
Right.
mostly just because I enjoy those artists more than anything.
Yeah. Oh no, I think covers are really interesting. Yeah.
I think this, yeah, you're right that sometimes an artist needs to make it their own.
Yeah.
Because one of the worst things is hearing some pop artist do a cover of another pop song, and it's the exact same basically in the instrumentation and the arrangement and all that. It's just with a different voice
Yeah.
singing, basically, and usually
Yeah.
singing it worse. That's one of the worst things. So yeah, you're right that when an artist covers a song and makes it their own, much like Michael Bublé does with a lot of his music, although a lot of his covers are also kind of in his same style anyway already. But a lot
Mm.
of them you kind of you kind of feel his vibe coming through. I
Yeah.
think John Mayer does some way. So the covers he does are all very, I feel, his own. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right then. Next segment of the show then is a brand new segment, and it's called Creature Feature. And of course, we mentioned before we have a Patreon, and the top tier on that Patreon is a mighty $25, and that is where you can pay us $25 and you can feature on the podcast. And this is the segment of the show where we bring on that guest. So, Tash, if you will, please bring on our guest for today, Morgan Bridge. Hello, Morgan. How are you going?
G'day, mate. I'm going fantastic.
Firstly, I just have to say, like, thank you so much. We did not expect this, especially only a few weeks after even launching the Patreon. If you remember from last week's podcast, Morgan Bridge was our shout out of the month because he donated the $1 on Patreon last week, and then he's bumped it up because he wants to take the front seat ride. And so we just have a few questions for you, Morgan, because we have no idea. We have no idea who you are. So the first question is, who are you and where are you from?
Well, my name's Morgan Bridge, and I'm from the good old King's Country of England. That's right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that where you live currently?
No, NZ, my dude.
Oh, New Zealand.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
And what is it that you do?
Not a lot, to sit around on the computer, and
Yeah.
also work at the airport,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What?
One of those dudes with the batons waving at the plane, telling it where to park.
Oh, really? Is
Yeah.
that which airport is that? If that's not too much to ask.
Oh, I don't know, mate. Nelson.
Nelson.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
Nelson.
Okay. Good old Nelson Airport. Lovely.
Yeah.
Good. And what we really want to know is, how did you discover Red Love Riot?
Well, I've been honest, I'm well acquainted with your boy Tash.
My boy Tash. True. Of course.
With your boy Tash. And
Yeah.
thought I'd be a bit generous, give you some money to help you. And 25 is the only amount I could give you. I'll donate more, but that's the top tier.
Well, that's very generous. Yeah. Good. Well,
Yeah,
the next
cheers,
question
man.
was.
Anytime.
Yeah, the next question was, why in your right mind did you decide to give us $25?
Oh, I suppose I'm a charitable person, I suppose.
Have you been listening to the podcast?
Well, I listened to the last one.
Okay.
And it was quite entertaining, I must say.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. It's good to hear that we're doing something right, you know?
Yeah.
We honestly appreciate it so much. More than you could ever imagine.
Splendid to hear.
Yeah. Morgan, have you heard of the James Lipton questionnaire?
I have not.
No, you haven't? All right. What we're gonna do is we're gonna ask you some questions from that. And we're gonna lightning round it. All right. So just first answer that comes to mind.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Morgan. What is your favorite word?
A duck.
Duck. What is your least favorite word?
Oh, seagull.
All right. What sound or noise do you love?
Pass.
Pass. What sound or noise do you hate?
Pass.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Being a cop.
Where are we up to? Oh yeah, what is your favorite curse word?
Shit.
Shit, nice. Fuck, I can't remember the other two. Oh yeah, all right. And final question. If heaven exists, what would you like God to say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, I don't know if I'll end up there, mate. What's up, dude? How's it going? There you go.
How's it going? Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful answers.
Lovely.
Thank you.
I have to say that questionnaire was much more interesting to listen to when it's lightning round like that. If you don't know,
Yeah.
in our very first podcast, me and Matt both went through those questions, and we like spent a lot of time deliberating and talking about the answers because that's what we're meant to do, and it kind of like dragged on a bit, and that's why that first podcast was so long. But yeah, it's a lot more interesting hearing the lightning questions. Duck is a
Yeah.
great. It is a great word, isn't it? And seagull.
It is.
I can
That's
understand.
great. Yeah.
I can
Fuck
definitely
them.
understand why seagulls. Just seagulls are horrible. Yeah, good. Oh, that was really interesting to hear. Really interesting.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, mate. Thank you. Thank you.
And of course, going along with today's episode, do you have a top 5 favorite cover song?
No, I've got. I've got like one.
Yeah, one. That'll do.
Disturb, Sound of Silence.
Do you have anything to say about it?
It's pretty good, you know. There you go. That's my
Nice.
that's my comment, you know.
That
It's a pretty
is
good
that
song.
all you have to
Sounds
say
nice.
about it, or no?
Pretty much, you know. I'm not really a music man. If it sounds good, it sounds good, you know.
It's fair
I
enough.
see.
Fair enough.
That's fair enough.
Well, once again, just thank you so much
Anytime.
for supporting us. Was there anything else you wanted to say to the world?
Give a shout out to Sabertooth War. Go subscribe to him. Sup, Connor. I know you're listening. There you go. That's my shout outs.
Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much
Anytime.
for your
It's been
time,
a
and thank you
pleasure.
very much for the money as well. We appreciate it so much.
No problem.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Well, we'll see you later, Morgan.
Toodaloo. Cheerio, old chums.
Wow,
All right.
what a stunning bloke.
What a lad. What a lad.
Yeah. And if any of you listening want to have the same creature feature on our podcast, head up that Patreon, chuck us some dollaroos. And of course, if that's too much to ask, there are obviously lower tiers, or you can help out as much as you want just by support, just by sharing, commenting, and liking the pages, the Facebook pages, and all those places. Subscribing to the YouTube channel, everything helps, for sure.
Indeed. Hey Ben, when it comes to
Yeah.
finding covers, how were you listening to them? Were you listening to them on like albums or vinyls, or were you listening to them on Spotify or YouTube, or how do you engage with listening to music?
Listen to music. It's funny that you mentioned YouTube because I can rant about YouTube listening to music. I think it's a horrific platform to listen to music on, and no one should ever do it. I personally use Apple Music. That's because I'm very
Okay.
I'm very tight and inside the Apple ecosystem. I use all their products basically, and I've tried using Spotify as well, and I did consider it at one point in time. And the reason I considered it was because I think Spark had like a Spotify package, but then the actual legitimate reason that I stuck with Apple Music was because they still had Taylor Swift. At the time, Taylor Swift had pulled her entire catalog from Spotify, and it wasn't necessarily because I'm a massive, huge Taylor Swift fan, but also because I created playlists for my youth group because they loved Taylor Swift, so I just had to have that on there, and I couldn't go without it. That's the honest truth. That's why I didn't use Spotify. But having used Spotify when I have used it, of course I found the user interface slightly terrible at times. But then, having said that, Apple Music's interface is also not the greatest, and it's also quite buggy at points, and it has been since it first launched. But yeah, for me, Apple Music's what I use, but I support any streaming service like that where you pay money and you get all the music you want, basically. The reason I hate YouTube so much, at least how it used to be people just going and looking up YouTube videos or looking up songs. And most of the time they're either playing the music video, which has other sound in it, which is not actually the song, or it's interrupted by ad after ad after ad. And there's also the stop and the start at the end of every YouTube video, and then searching up a new one, or there's the whole issue around people stopping music and playing a new song, which of course when you use Spotify or Apple Music, you can queue music so that that doesn't have to happen. It's just a horrible platform. I know there's a YouTube Music app. Maybe if you want to do that, you want to subscribe to YouTube Premium or whatever, that's fine. You do that, and at least your experience is slightly more musicified when you use the music app, as opposed to just the traditional, what I call the noob approach of listening to music on YouTube. Yeah. Sorry, there's my little rant. What were we talking about?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Well, that's
Music.
basically what we're talking about, is just how we're listening to music and shit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Because I'm definitely one of those people.
You're about to tell me you listen to music on YouTube, aren't you?
Yep.
Oh my word.
I'm lazy.
Well,
I'm lazy. Okay. Sue me, all right? And I think one of the major things is because how I listen to music is really weird. I listen to like 3 songs at a time usually, and I'm listening to them like over and over again, and then until I get sick of those 3 songs, and then I move on and then I find 3 new songs, and then I listen to those songs over and over again. Because I find it interesting, especially with Spot. And let me know if you agree with this or disagree with this, right? But I find that it's really interesting how people are listening to music nowadays, right? With Spotify and all that, right? Because I think it sort of kills the album style of listening to music, right? From like, because like in the old days, you'd listen to album by album, right? And it would be like first track to last track. But now you can sort of just listen to singles. But I think that sort of takes away from the point of albums, because you can get some really important like especially with concept albums, right? Whether it be Dark Side of the Moon, or like American Idiot or something, where the entire album is a story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting that because of Spotify, we've sort of lost that kind of thing where now everyone just listens to a couple of singles. And as I said, because I only listen to like 3 songs at a time, yeah, I'm sort of in that boat. But I think with the sort of resurrection or Renaissance era that we're living in, with in regards to vinyl, we sort of are getting that return to listening to albums.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know, like what's your thoughts on that?
I think in some ways, I don't think necessarily Spotify has changed the way we listen to music in terms of albums and things like that. I think it's always been the case that music lovers like us have listened to albums. We've gone out and bought the CD, or we bought it on iTunes, or we bought the vinyl. But
Right.
chumheads, which is what I call everyone else. No offense to everyone else. If you're not the huge music fan, it's fine. You're not. Chumhead sounds a bit derogatory, but really what I just mean is people who don't appreciate the art of music maybe as much as we do, and just like to listen to something that they enjoy. That I made it sound way worse than what I actually meant it to be. But people who just prefer to listen to, like you say, singles and things like that, I think they've always done that. I think that's not because of Spotify. That's actually because of the radio. And the radio has always played singles. And so people only hear singles, and those are the songs that they would download from the internet, be that through iTunes or nowadays on Spotify. Or, of course, I know people who used to just buy the singles as CDs as well. So they would just buy the singles there. So that culture always has existed, I think, and that way of listening to music has always been that way. With Spotify and the such, I think it's just made it more convenient. More convenient for everyone to do the same thing, and of course better for the artists and the music companies in terms of the return that they get on it as well. But I think the actual habits are the same. It's just easier and better for everyone because it's the way the industry works now.
It's interesting, but I am a big proponent of listening to albums. I don't do it as much as I like should, I reckon. Yeah, because like I said, there's some real good concept albums out there where it's an entire story, and by not listening to the full album, you don't get the full effect of it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so with Spotify though. I do agree though that sure, radio started it, but I think sort of streaming services have made it commonplace to listen to just singles and that, because no one listens to a full out, like, people listen to playlists, right? And they're not listening
Yeah.
to a full album anymore. You know, it's
Yeah.
just song by song, and you're jumping from artists, which is fine, but there is something about an entire album and sort of musicality of that. That's just me.
Yeah. I I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I think it's been like that before Spotify. That's what I'm saying. I think
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
already like that just because of the way that music's been distributed by the radio stations. I think that's what's
Right.
formed that habit. Maybe it's easier I think it's almost easier now because now we're not just getting singles. A lot of people are delving into the albums and finding their favorite songs from those
Mm.
albums. They still might not listen to the whole album as one piece, but at least they're finding more music than they did previously.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's almost slightly better, I think. There's also the issue with Spotify where if you only have the free Spotify, you can only shuffle things, right? You can only shuffle playlists or albums, I believe, which is horrifically terrible for your listening experience. If you really love listening to music, you won't do that to yourself. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
couldn't,
yeah.
and that like you have to have the perfect playlists that you can shuffle, which I guess you can do actually. Actually, yeah, I guess that is quite a common thing. I mean, I do that. I have a playlist that I shuffle all around. I guess then the thing you just have to put up with is the ads. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's there's pros and cons, of course, to everything, and I guess it does depend on your habits and how much you enjoy listening to music and how important that music is to you. To me, I could never do it, not just because of the listening experience, but also because I want to know that I'm supporting the artists as well in the best way that I can. And of course, I'm not 100% sure how the monetization works when you have free Spotify, but I assume artists
Mm.
get less from those players because most of the ads on Spotify are just get Spotify Premium, blah blah blah. Um,
Yeah. So with like physical copies, right? It's quite a small cut for the artists themselves. For Spotify, I'm pretty sure it's a relatively small cut as well.
ah, yeah, it's tiny.
The best way to actually support an artist is to go see them live. That's the best.
Right.
That's
Yes.
that's the way that musicians are making their money now is through tours. So if you want to support an artist, go see them live. And I would argue seeing an artist live is the best quality that you're gonna get.
Yeah. I mean, usually it depends on the artist. There's certain artists, mostly like I'm thinking of like pop artists and DJs, that sort of thing, where I would argue that there's no benefit to seeing them live in terms of your listening experience, but a lot of bands are much better live. That's kind of a
Yeah.
different topic on its own. Um, I'm pretty sure how Spotify works though, and I assume Apple Music does it the same way, is that they take all the money, for example, from 1 month of subscribers and they divvy that up based on how much each song was played. So it's a different amount. It's not necessarily a set dollar amount per play. It's a really, really tiny, tiny cut per play. But of course, when you have major artists that get millions and millions of plays every day, then yeah, they're going to earn their money's worth. Which of course means, yeah, it is really hard for independent artists. And yeah, like you say, the best way to support them is to, I would say, either buy their music outright, buying it on Bandcamp or iTunes or wherever they're selling it, or in physical form from them, or seeing them live if they have a gig nearby locally. What do you think on that? Because like I heard one person suggesting that it would make more sense to divvy up each subscriber's dollar amount. So for example, their $10 and split that amongst who they listen to. So for example, if I only listened to John Mayer for 1 month, that my $10 or my $8, let's say, a cut out of what I paid, or $5, whatever the cut is, my 100% of my cut would go to John Mayer, as opposed to,
Yeah.
for example, let's say $1 million is how much was paid from subscribers, and John Mayer was only listened to by 1% of all people, meaning they get what he gets 1% of all that money, as opposed to as opposed to dividing it by how much, dividing it up per subscriber. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like it sounds kind of confusing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reading an article here that's saying so apparently Spotify pays about $0.006 to $0.0084 dollars per stream to the holder of music rights.
Yeah,
However, the holder can be split among the record label, producers, artists, and songwriters. In
true.
short, streaming is a volume game. So by the sound, yeah. So like the thing is that the actual artists themselves is getting like the tiniest sliver of the money.
Yeah, there's one major reason why record labels are kind of less necessary these days, because it's becoming easier to produce your own music as well.
Yeah.
And just chucking it up under your own label cuts out that middleman where you don't necessarily need it. Yeah, but there's also obviously your distributor, which is kind of necessary. I think who will take some of the cut as well, and that's so that you can have it on multiple platforms with ease. What else was I going to say? I was going to say I was saw a video recently about Spotify specifically, and it was kind of talking about Spotify versus Netflix and their different subscription models. And it was talking about how Spotify to this day still hasn't made a profit, and how
Mm,
they just keep relying on investors to put more money into them, because the way their model works, um, for every user, for every subscriber that they get, they have to pay more money out to the artist, because they pay per song, obviously, which is played, which is different to, for example, Netflix, which has a set cost for everything that they license, and then obviously they have to pay that back with a certain amount of subscribers, and then every subscriber after that is 100% profit. So
mm,
all they need is enough to get past that threshold, and then they're nothing but profit. Whereas Spotify is always paying out more money per subscriber they
right.
get. They increase the amount of money they have to pay as well. So that's why it makes it hard for Spotify. So there's a whole question around that, around whether you think the streaming services as they are, if that is a satisfactory way of distributing music and a way of paying for music, or do you think that we need something else or some other alternative or a different strategy?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I don't see streaming services going away anytime soon, you know? And that's just because mainly because of the popularity of it. Like I don't have Spotify, I don't have nor do I have Apple Music. I sort of the major way I listen to music is either vinyls or sort of listening to um or a lot of time watching like chucking like something on YouTube on in the background while I'm doing like work or whatever or stuff that I've already like downloaded on my phone. All I know is that I think it's important that the artist gets a bigger cut of the money and that the artists need to be supported. Um Not
Yeah,
necessarily the performer, I would argue not necessarily the performer, but the songwriter. I mean, most of the music I listen to, the songwriter and the performer are overlapped, because of the fact that I mostly listen to rock music, while the difference is with pop music, a lot of the time it's you know a team of like 8 people writing a song, which I find ridiculous to be honest. Beyonce is actually a really good example of that. A lot of her stuff is like 8 people writing one of her songs. Potentially, all right. Here's a hot take from me. Right, Beyonce is overrated.
100%.
I know, I know. I just said it, guys.
I feel like that's not an under. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. Um, well then, if that's all you have to say on music, um, merch. Oh yeah, that's right. Tash has just mentioned merchandise, so you can support the artist by buying merch, whether that be at their concert or you could probably buy it on most of their stores. I'm sure they sell plenty of stuff. That is a good point. It's a good way to
Yeah.
support people.
I wonder how much of a cut though the artist gets from merch.
I feel like it's one of those things that'll be one of the things they get the most out of, right? Because making t-shirts and stuff doesn't cost that much really, and they're usually quite expensive if they're for a band, especially if they're on a tour and they've got like tour dates on them because they're like exclusive.
Yeah.
So they're usually quite expensive. Yeah, I usually like to buy some merch when I see a band live, so I bought a London Grammar t-shirt last year, and when I saw John Mayer, I got a hoodie from him, or from his truck outside.
Yeah, I've done the same. When I saw the Foo Fighters, I got a Foo Fighters t-shirt. And when I saw Green Day, I got a Green Day shirt as well. Because I think that's also part of the experience of going and seeing a band live is getting the merch as well.
Yeah.
As sort of a hey, I saw this band, you know, I was there sort of thing.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to an end of this segment on music streaming, which leads us to the next segment of our show, which is
What You Doing?
This segment called What You Doing is talking about what we're doing, what we're listening to, what we're reading, what we're watching, and what we would like to do /read/watch in the future. And again, kind of like I was last week, I've been quite busy this week. I've been editing my final project at school, and that's been lots and lots of fun. It's coming along quite nicely, and I'm very excited for it. But yeah, at home, I haven't really had time to delve into any other TV shows that I've been meaning on watching. I watched this morning's episode of The Good Place while I ate breakfast, and I've been just watching a few episodes of IT Crowd before I fall asleep. I also had a lot of YouTube to catch up on because I was away for a week on shoot with no internet access, and there was a lot of YouTube videos coming through my feed that I finally finished, I think, last night, getting through. But yeah, I'm definitely keen to finally get around to watching Season 3 of Broadchurch, because I've been putting that off for ages, but now I'm actually keen to watch it, and again, finding myself time for that, hopefully. As well as The Dragon Prince, which part of me wants to watch because I'm excited to see that show, and part of me doesn't care enough about it because I've heard that it's kind of good but not great. I've heard mixed things really on that show. But the other thing that's exciting, I think literally today or yesterday, a new album came out from Muse. I think I heard a couple of their singles they put out a few months ago or whatever, so I'm keen to listen to that one. And also, Arctic Monkeys just tickets went on sale this week for their show in Auckland in March, and I've got some tickets for that. So,
oh, you lucky! Oh, I'm so jealous, Ben.
Did they sell out? Did they?
No, I just can't afford to get tickets.
No, well, neither can I. So that's why I asked my mum for Christmas. And so
awesome.
So yeah, we've got some tickets for. Well, I guess now I know what I'm getting for Christmas, which I usually do anyway. So.
Are you going with your family?
Yeah.
Or... Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going with my brother and my sister-in-law, who are going to come up from Christchurch. So that's going to be lots of fun.
I am so jealous of you right now.
You know, you could come up. You could come outside when we're waiting in line. You could say hi, and you could buy some band merch at least while you're there. And then you just listen. You can hear the thumping from outside as you just listen along. Yeah. They sold out their Melbourne and Sydney shows, I think, and so they had to add another show for each of those cities. And they sold the Auckland one. I don't think it's completely sold out, as far as I'm aware, but they sold like the main seating sections pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I think my mum was buying the tickets. She only bought them like 3 or 4 hours after they went on sale, and like all the mains, the A reserve, like the front tier of seating was like all sold out already. So we're like slightly further back, which is slightly annoying, but you know, you do what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll still be great. I mean, when I saw John Mayer, I was like right in the back corner, and I still thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm sure we'll be fine.
All right, for the stuff that I've been watching / listening to. So the first thing I watched was Just Charlie, which is a little British indie film that was either released this year or last year. It's basically about a trans girl. Yeah, just a really nice little story about, to be honest, an underrepresented issue in today's media. Yeah, and just a beautiful film in terms of how it was shot. Interesting use of high key lighting. A lot of sort of like that sort of lens flare sort of stuff going on. Just looked really nice and a nice little story. The other film I watched was last night. I watched Pretty in Pink. John Hughes wrote the film. One of the very few films I think that he didn't actually direct. So yeah, teen film, very much an 80s film. Yeah, just a nice story. Definitely, I would say not as good as either The Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Maybe that's because John Hughes didn't direct it. It was a different director, but stars Molly Ringwald. Also stars John Cryer, who some people may recognize from Two and a Half Men. Yeah, just I don't know. A nice little film there as well. The other thing that I've been doing is listening to music. I've been really getting into XXX Tentacion and been listening to some of his stuff. Yeah, really talented rapper. Unfortunately, he passed away earlier in the year. Was only 20, which really sucks. But yeah, a really talented rapper. So I've been listening to his stuff. That's about all I've been listening to. For stuff I want to see, that's a good question. I think I've sort of mentioned all the stuff that I want to see. So there's nothing I can really think of off the top of my head. So now we are up to the section of the podcast that we call Crunchy Comments. So what we do is we have a look at the live Twitch chat. We also have a look at our other socials such as Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, anything else we're on. And what we do is we read these comments on the next podcast.
Yeah, so I don't think we've had any comments for this week on YouTube or anything like that. But we did have a few people in the live chat. So shout out to Hobo Supreme, Arctic Wolverine, and KK Malone and Dan Santiago. Looks like
Yeah.
I think that's everyone who was in the chat. And we had a few comments. Hobo Supreme mentioning, don't think you even need to do heroin for 30 days. 1 or 2 would do it. And Arctic Wolverine saying, yeah, if you did it for 30 days straight, you would be dead.
Well, not necessarily.
I'm not familiar at all with the effects of heroin, so...
Yeah, because I don't think you'll necessarily be dead. It would depend on if your tolerance is building up, and therefore... Because what happens is your tolerance builds up, right? You think... The thing with the majority of ODs is what happens is a user uses it for X amount of days, they go up, they stop using for whatever reason, then they relapse and they think their tolerance is still up, but it's not, and so they go straight up to that level, and as a result they overdose. Why I said 30 days as opposed to 1 or 2 is 1 or 2 is kind of hard to sort of establish a habit. I would
Right.
30 days is sort of an over exaggeration of it. But it would have to be longer than 1 or 2 days to develop a habit. But I suppose it would also depend on the individual person as well. So that's another side of it as well.
Yeah, a few of the guys in the chat have listed some of their favorite cover songs as well. Arctic Wolverine mentions Land of Confusion, Disturbed, Hobo Supreme, The Man Who Solved the World. There's a lot of chat going on, but not a lot of direct comments towards us or questions for us. Hobo Supreme agrees that Johnny Cash is an absolutely good pick. If this sounds confusing and boring, you should just join in live in the chat next time, and it won't sound so strange. Yeah, so if you don't know, we're on Twitch. Look us up, Red Life Riot, no spaces, or twitch.com/Red Life Riot. We go live usually on a Saturday morning here in New Zealand, roughly around 10:30 a.m. Kind of moves around sometimes. We get busy doing other things. But yeah, um, do that. Hug the Wolverine says,
Yeah.
what about Jack Black's cover of War Pigs? No, haven't heard that one either.
I don't think I've heard that
what else?
either.
And Hoper Supreme mentions Tears for Fears is a good example of where I still prefer the original even after liking the cover. Dan Santiago gave a thumbs up to Avicii, I think. Or Ugg the Wolverine mentioned Avicii and then Dan Santiago gave him a thumbs up. I shouldn't have meant he liked when I mentioned Avicii. Some of these Twitch comments are kind of confusing because, like, if I don't remember exactly what was said when they posted the comment, it's kind of unclear what they were talking about. And KK and Malone said, "Sup, Morgan." Yeah, not too much going on in the chat. I'd encourage you guys to ask us questions. It doesn't even have to be about what we're talking about on the podcast. It can be literally anything, and we'll give it a stab probably. Yeah. I was thinking we were gonna do a shout out, but then I remembered that we only do the shout out on a monthly basis. But I'll just shout out once again to Morgan Bridge, just because he's obviously a lad, giving us that $25.
Exactly.
Yeah, I said last week that we were going to shout out every Patreon member because no one had purchased the $10 shout out one, but now that he has gone above that tier, he's going to be the only one getting a shout out every month. So if you want to join Morgan in having a shout out every month or every week or whenever we decide to do it, join that Patreon tier. And we promise all that money from Patreon's going towards better equipment, because if you can't tell, this podcast doesn't sound that great in terms of the audio quality, and me and Matt aren't even in the same room, so we plan on finding some studio space and some microphones so we can do this properly and have a bit of a better back and forth, and we don't cut out and have all these technical issues that our good old technical man Tash has to solve for us.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Matt.
And I've been Ben.
Thank you guys. See ya.